Well, hello there. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you, wherever you might be in the world. My name's Anna, if you're new to the channel, and obviously I'm delivering the videos here, sharing my information with you. I'd like to welcome you to Lorena's Labyrinth. If you're a newbie, I hope that you will stay. If you're a returning visitor, I'm grateful as always, bit repetitive, but it's a fact. I appreciate all the support that we get. Anyway, for the newbies, before I actually get into the content today, I'm just going to remind people and the returning visitors as well that we've got a number of playlists here on the channel for you to take a look at your leisure. The other reminder too is that when it comes to the content, I'm aware that some people have already got information, learning and understanding about the crystals I put up, or about any of the videos that I put up. So what I try and do is actually I timestamp it, and this way you can go to the areas of interest to you. You're not stuck having to sit through the entire video, especially because they can be quite long at different times. Anyway, today I'm going to be talking about hematite. I'll get straight into it. I grew up in an area where hematite was actually being mined, and we called it iron ore back in the day. Of course, as always, when I try and talk, my little puppy dog gets very busy with his squeaky toy. So if you can hear that in the background, I do apologise, but I'm going to push on with it. Anyway, where I grew up, the area that they mined hematite was actually the best hematite in the world at the time. I mean, I think most of the good quality has actually been taken out of the area now. But suffice to say, when it comes to hematite, I've got very selective taste, shall we say. I like the really good stuff, apparently. But that, of course, ends up being quite pricey. So let's get into the information I can share with you about hematite. So I guess the thing to talk about first is, what does hematite look like? Now, obviously, when people are buying it in the shops, they're usually getting the polished tumbles like we've got here. The one on the left is a palm stone, and I've got to be honest, I don't understand why it's got the little scratchy marks on it. I'm not going to say this is not the real McCoy. I'm just going to say that's not my experience of seeing hematite. It's more the finish that we've got on the right-hand side of this slide. But what I would say is the colour that I expect to see with hematite is actually the image on the left. I'm casting my mind back because generally I have what we call the rough or the raw ore, the mineral, as opposed to polished hematite. But look, either way, you can expect it to be a silvery grey type colour, even with hues of blue in it if it's really good quality. And it does polish up very well. Back in the day, when I was growing up, and we are talking about 50 odd years ago now, hematite jewellery actually wasn't super popular, but it still was very pretty. I had some of it. I was gifted some of it by my auntie, and the one that I was given was a circle, a small sphere that was set in silver. Anyway, it was very beautiful actually back in the day. But yes, it definitely has this metallic luster to it. So before we go on and talk about hematite itself and its metaphysical properties and the rest of the information that obviously I'm going to give to you, I just want to talk about rainbow hematite for a moment. And this is because, for a couple of reasons actually. The first one is that I call rainbow hematite peacock ore. And when you do a Google for peacock ore online, you're going to see, I think you've got rainbow chalcopyrite, if that's how we pronounce it, is being sold as peacock ore. You're going to see bornite being sold as peacock ore, and then you also get this rainbow hematite as being sold as peacock ore as well. So I thought, look, I will actually just touch on this for a moment. I might have to do a video completely on rainbow crystals as one broad generic term, but when it comes to rainbow hematite, I'm open to correction. If we've got geos out there or people that are mineral experts or whatever, I am open to be corrected. But my gut instincts are that the rainbow pyrite tumbles on the right-hand side, and they are being sold as peacock ore. and I think I saw it being sold as bornite. Okay, but the thing is, I don't believe that they're either bornite or peacock ore. Let me just think on how I'm going to say this. Okay, what I believe we're looking at with that image on the right-hand side is the hematite tumbles that we saw on the other slide that have been treated with titanium. And I think it's called a titanium coating that gives this flash and iridescence and all the rest of it. But either way, what I believe, and as I say, I'm open to correction, we are looking at a manufactured product here. But when we're actually talking about rainbow hematite, the real stuff is naturally forming. And this is why I've got these other images here, because neither of them actually do real justice to what it looks like. I've got some here, and I think probably the colorings that on mine are more like the image on the right, which is not a good image. So I would recommend that you do your own Googling, so you can try and get better shots and close-ups and all the rest of it. What I would say is it's kind of like this layered, almost dripping stuff, but it feels very sandy, a bit like sandpaper. It's not super fragile, but it does have fragility to it. It can break, and I actually have broken mine as well. What else can I say about this? I wouldn't say that rainbow hematite is actually suitable for jewellery making or tumbles, to be honest. But, as I say, I don't actually make jewellery, so who knows, maybe it does come up okay. What I will say before I move on to the next slide is that when it comes to peacock ore, as I call it, rainbow hematite, struggling with terminology here, I do know that its metaphysical properties are related to joy and instilling joy at a very deep level in your heart. And to put this into perspective, people who have had this experience will understand what I mean. If not, you might have to try and empathize or get your head around it. But the type of person that would benefit from rainbow hematite would be a person who's got some very deeply embedded trauma. And certainly with Aboriginal Australians, they describe, significant distress, shall we say, this real suffering and trauma as having been broken spirited or had their heart broken, and the heart feels like it's empty and drained and devoid and numb, that it just kind of loses the spark for life. That's what it feels like for them. So they are the kind of people with this kind of emotional numbness, shall we say, that would benefit from rainbow hematite, because it's about reigniting joy and pleasure and harmony and that kind of stuff into that heart chakra area. But anyway, I'll move along with more information about hematite in general now, not rainbow. We're going to put the rainbow aside for now and just get into hematite. So, from a metaphysical overview perspective, hematite is primarily a grounding type crystal, in my experience anyway. If a person's got a tendency to go off with the fairies and into that old la la land, they would definitely benefit from wearing hematite or just carrying it on their person, jewelry or whatever, because realistically there's nothing wrong with actually having that capacity to go out there and be optimistic and to reach these really high energetic realms, shall we say. But when we've got a physical body, gosh, I'm stumbling over my words today. So backing up a little bit, when we've got a physical body, it helps to remain realistic and practical in our approach to life. Otherwise, we just tend to get buffered around all over the place and wonder why stuff is happening to us. And we can even perhaps become a victim of our own thinking patterns and failure to ground and be practical. So anyway, when we talk about hematite, we're talking about energy balancing. We're talking about strengthening and aligning the chakras and the auric layers, which of course, when we have everything in alignment in the aura and the chakras, we then result in emotional clarity. We get clear thinking. And I must point out that when we talk about emotional clarity, this is about understanding what our feelings are, being able to express them, being able to name them, being fully aware. And that includes also being aware of what our triggers are. And when we can manage our emotions, then we're able to have greater tranquility within our life. There's greater peace. But also on top of this, when we talk about hematite, there's a lot more to it as far as the spiritual, physical healing attributes and emotional. And we'll talk about those in a little while. Just a reminder, though, before we get into it, that when we talk about physical healing attributes and even actually the emotional ones, you would not stop seeing your professional health workers and just use crystals. Crystals may or may not help and enhance your life, your health and well-being. Sometimes, who knows, maybe it's psychosomatic, maybe it is genuine, maybe it really is these healing properties. We don't know. There's no scientific evidence to support it, is where I'm going. So what can I say? This is why I really invite people to actually put their experiences down, because even if it is psychosomatic, who cares? If it worked for you, that's all that's important, from where I sit anyway. From an astrological perspective, hematite is apparently recommended for people who are the Sagittarians, the Arians, or even the Geminis. Now, of course, anybody can use hematite. It's the same with all the crystals, but there are recommendations, not necessarily by me, but where I've sort of heard along the way, or even found it when I'm Googling and seen that other people think that this is the case. Now, I must admit, I have an open mind towards the preference or the links and associations, but it does make sense to me, I've got to say, particularly in this one. If we think about the fact that the Sag, the Aries, and the Gemini all can be a bit hot-headed, if we look at hematite as not only being grounding and helping a person to work with and through their reality, that's going to lend itself to more emotional control, which we talked about before, that being able to see more clearly, think more clearly, and emotional self-mastery there is associated with the hematite. So it makes sense anyway, because although Gemini is an air sign, because it's the twins, it's got an aspect of fire to it. And this is why sometimes in my experience, no offense meant to the Geminis, sometimes they can be a little reactive and a little bit over the top, just based on my experiences. So anyway, what I'm going to do now is talk to you about iron ore as opposed to hematite, because iron ore just seems to come more naturally to me. Okay, as I said before, I grew up in an area where it was mined. It was as common as, I think every house had some iron ore in it, and we used to, massive pieces really, that used to be used as bookends. Well, I was surprised to learn that it has that mineral hardness scale of 5 to 6. I thought it would be a lot harder, but it's actually not. Now, this is a little bit of trivia. As I said before, the area that I was growing up in, it was considered to be the best. Brazil was our main competitor as far as quality of crystal goes, which is actually really interesting, because a lot of the crystals and rocks that come out of Brazil, they are like top of the range. But I think what happened was, because iron ore is what they use to make iron, it's obviously it gets melted down and smelted and that kind of stuff, and then put into other purposes. I guess they call that repurposing. I think by the time the Australian iron ore came on the market, Brazil had probably just about been mined out. And if you were to look at what we're selling on the market these days as compared to what we were selling back when I was growing up, scarily, in about the 1970s, it just doesn't look the same anymore, okay? So this is why I've put a couple of samples up here for you to look at. The type of iron ore we had was probably more the colour, in fact, more like the image on the right-hand side there. That's what we used to get in Western Australia, where I'm from. But you would also sometimes get these really silvery type ones in the larger image. But you can see when you look at that image on the bottom, the little triangle type one, that you've got this greyish, bluish type colour. It's quite, I don't know if the word is fine, that we would call it fine. It's tightly packed, shall we say. But it's not super rough like the rainbow hematite, okay? It's a whole different texture. It's still a bit gravelly, but the other thing is too that the image on the right, what I liked about that is it shows the red crust at the top. I call it the crust, okay? You would, I guess, if people were making jewellery, you would use that top image one. But anyway, I've got some more photos I want to show you just as part of the discussion. So, as far as buying tips go with hematite, I really don't think that there's going to be too much of an issue here with people faking it. You know, it's quite abundant, it's everywhere, it's not super expensive to buy. I mean, once it's been polished, and what I do see with some of the sites that are selling it online, they sort of bump the price up with, you know, a few fancy words and, oh, it's magical and all the rest of it. Well, they all are, so, you know, it doesn't matter. Usually it's about scarcity that pushes the price up of a product. And this goes with iron ore as well. Well, iron ore is not that scarce, but what we do have is different qualities of iron ore. So I think the really good quality iron ore is potentially becoming more scarce. I don't know, I haven't looked into it that far, but what would I say here? Just checking my notes for you. I do recall that it's not a lightweight metal, okay? So when you're holding it in your hands, it's actually quite heavy. You would not be filling your suitcase up and taking it back on a plane because it's quite a heavy product. Now, with these images here, obviously I've put up another image of what we've got as rainbow hematite. What I wanted to show you is differences in qualities here, and that the formation on the right, that's definitely, I got that from a geology mine site and a geology website, and that is definitely hematite. I can't remember what name they give it, but I've never seen it in that shape and form, okay? I've only ever seen it in the big blue rocks that get broken up and broken down, and they've got that little red crusty edge on it. I've put the central image in here because that was being sold as hematite in the rough. And call me an iron ore snob, and I could be. I'm just like, this must be really, really poor grade. I just saw my notes here. That little one on the side, the little roundish type one, that's called a kidney hematite, and I have never ever seen that in real life. But apparently that comes out of the UK, just in case people are interested. I've got the arrows on there because I want to point out that there's aspects of this central image that just don't look right to me. I'm just going to be a bit careful with what I say, I guess. Look, all I can really say about that is I think it's very low grade, it's very poor quality, it is probably iron ore. But what they have done to make it look a little bit better, because it really is a ratty, dirty looking bunch of rocks from what I can see, it looks to me like they've wet it. Now, when they wet, this is actually a good tip for you guys, okay? Quite often, colours don't show up on crystals unless the crystal is wet. And when people are trying to take a photograph to sell something online, they want the colours to really stand out. So they will actually wet the crystals. And so these arrows that I've got on here are trying to point to you that the yellow one, okay, you can see that looks like dry dirt, but there's a little patch of wet on there, okay, just to the right of it. Where the pink arrow is pointing, you're starting to see a stripe there of the wet, ready type mud, okay, and I think that's mud. I don't think that's actually the crusty bit. And I'm not seeing any real silver on this, except for maybe that little rock that's at the top of the image above the yellow. And if that's the best hematite they've got, that's a little bit sorry and sad, in my opinion. And in a way, this is a bit of a buying tip, okay? These images, I actually went and did a bit of a Google so that I could find some to show you the area that I grew up in and what it was like. Now, this image on the right where somebody's holding out that grey rock, that's obviously a big lump of iron ore. Now, to me, when I look at that, I haven't worked on an iron ore mine site for many years, so I haven't seen it. But to me, if this is what we're pulling out of the ground these days, then it is nowhere near the same quality that we were pulling out back in the 70s, 80s and 90s. So that must mean that we've pulled out all the good stuff. But the other stuff's just a little bit of fun for you to be able to get an idea of what it was like for me when I was growing up, if you're at all interested. The area that I lived in, we had this red dirt. It was everywhere. And I actually got a good laugh when I was doing this video and finding these photos, and I was remembering people new to the town with their white clothes going, oh no, I washed my clothes. I put my white shirt in the wash and it came out pink, and I've used bleach. I can never get rid of the pink in the shirt anymore. It's like, well, you do have to make sure that washing machine is clean before you drop your white ones in. And the other thing is, you don't dry it outside because the wind is going to pick up the red dirt and throw it over your clothes. And you don't wash your work clothes in the washing machine that you wash your other ones in. Just all of these kind of things. That red dirt gets in everywhere. The image on the left-hand side, I just wanted to show you because that to me is more realistic of the type of iron ore. Look, I mean, you can get them really big slabs, which they do actually. They blast, unfortunately. They'll use their dynamite, they'll blast the big bits and then they crush it down and make it smaller. So that image that is on the left, that would be processed and refined to a certain extent for the person to be able to hold that much in their hand. But I wanted to show it to you because you can actually see that even within these images, there is this red outer layer. Most of that is going to be dirt. By the time it's washed off, I think we've probably got some pretty good quality hematite under there. And these photographs that I took were public, just so people know, they were public gallery images, personal images that people had just put up as well. And anyway, moving on. So to go into a little bit more detail about the metaphysical properties of hematite, when we're talking about the spiritual attributes, we've obviously covered grounding, that it is a grounding crystal. It has the capacity to transform negative thoughts, behaviours and all of this kind of thing into positive. One of the interesting things, and I hadn't thought about it, but I actually saw it somewhere where it's recommended for use in divination or doing dowsing as a pendulum, because it's actually apparently got the perfect qualities required for that kind of use. You can also, on a more, if you're into the out there stuff, which I am, you can actually meditate with it to attune yourself to the earth energies and create your earth nature connection. Also, what else have we got? Oh, for those people that don't know what dowsing is, it's kind of a form of divination that does involve the psychic or the person that uses it. Often you will see people with the two sticks. I don't know, actually I shouldn't say often you will see it. Often in Australia back in the day, we used to see the old boys out with two sticks going and doing the water dowsing or the water divining. They were trying to find where the water was, especially on farming properties. I get a good laugh out of that, just so that you know, because a lot of the old boys that used to do that would not have called themselves psychic, and they don't think that there's anything that is out there odd or weird about picking up two sticks and trying to find a water source, which of course is metaphysical. Actually, I'm going to use a personal one here, and this one kind of flies in the face of a lot of the information you're going to find online. A lot of people will promote amethyst as being a really good crystal for children to use to help them sleep and as a treatment to insomnia. Now, that might be true, but what I'm going to say is I had, my son was having a lot of night terrors, a lot of nightmares, and it turned out, this is just so incredible that people are probably going to say she's out with the fairies. It didn't happen. What happened was a friend of mine who was a medium who could see spirit guides. This is back in the day before I'd actually progressed to where I'm at. I was talking to her and she wasn't aware that my son was having nightmares, and it was actually, I was at home on the telephone to her and she said, my guide's just arrived and he said that you need to go and have a look under your son's pillow. And I was like, what? She said, no, he's telling me that. She said, oh, well, hang on, let me check first. She said, is he having nightmares? I said, yes, he is. She said, well, he's saying it's because he's got amethyst under his pillow and you need to go and take it out and replace it with hematite. And I was like, what? No, he doesn't. Immediate denial that mothers do. No, he doesn't. So anyway, I've gone in there, had a quick look. I'm not going to be too gender, but I will because I like a sense of humour. I had a man look. I lifted up the pillow and I couldn't see anything. And I said to her, no, there's nothing there. She's done the woman thing and got a bit irritable with me and said, he told me you didn't look properly. You need to look harder. She said, because there is an amethyst crystal there under his pillow. And I'm like, oh my goodness me. I thought she's not going to let up. And they were not. They were not going to let up. So I lifted the pillow. Definitely wasn't there. I mean, the poor little fella was sleeping. And God love the universe, okay? Because I said, I don't want to wake him up. They said, it's okay. We're going to keep him asleep. You need to find that amethyst. So with that, I'm lifting up the mattress of his bed while he's still in there sleeping to try and find this amethyst that I didn't believe was there. Well, I found it. Long story short, I found it. It was only a very small crystal point. He was probably about 7 at the time, and he had broken it off my geode. Obviously thought it was pretty and stuck it under his pillow. So I replaced it with the hematite, and that actually resolved the nightmares. And so this is why I always have a little bit of conflict when I read people saying that you should use a crystal this way or that way, because I think a lot of the time it's down to experience. And even I'm a little mindful that I might be regurgitating stuff that other people have said, and this might not be accurate. And this is why it's really important to share personal experiences and not just what we find in text. But anyway, I have completely diverted here. Hematite's good for stopping nightmares. All right, nightmares and night terrors. It actually works, in my experience. So being a very practical crystal, either way, there's supposed to be a lot of physical attributes for hematite. So I'm actually just going to read them through and jump on to the next slide so that it doesn't get too long, this video. Okay, accidents. It's good for accident prevention. And this is because when we're ungrounded, of course, we just have accidents. It's supposed to be, I want to do the big disclaimer here because to me, this is one of the things I read that I struggle with, okay? It's supposed to be beneficial to people suffering from AIDS and anemia. If people have got bleeding, blood flow, blood clot type disorders, supposed to help broken bones and fractures heal more easily. Apparently, if people have got bulimia, chronic fatigue, or circulation and balance disorders, it's supposed to help out there as well. Apparently, you can treat kennel cough in dogs as well with it. If people suffer from leg cramps or just muscle cramps in general, apparently it will benefit. It's supposed to be able to eliminate fevers as well, or reduce them. Add a little boost of energy if you're feeling a bit weary and tired. What else have we got here? It's supposed to be beneficial for people suffering from insomnia or who have got some kind of metabolic disorder that blocks iron absorption. I'm reading my notes here, folks. What else? Inflammation of the joints. Okay, neurologically, it's supposed to benefit by helping pathways to knowledge and learning. What else? Inner ear problems that cause dizziness. Vertebrae, realigning the vertebrae if they have been falling in and out of alignment. Weak muscles, I mentioned that, and basically just strengthen the physical body. Okay, I'm going to move on from this. So I probably should have finished off that story about my son with the amethyst. I was going to save it for the amethyst video actually, but before we talk about this one, I'll just quickly slot in. What the guides had said to my mate when we were on the phone was he's having nightmares because he's seeing a wolf, and the wolf is his totem animal protector, which of course I'd never heard of anything like that. This is way back in the time. And of course my son, you don't know his name, so it's okay if I share this information with you because one, he doesn't know and you don't know him, so it works for me. Anyway, the bottom line is what the guide sent through from my mate was he was astral traveling at night in his sleep state, and that the amethyst was actually I suppose promoting it, making it very easy for him to flip out there in his sleep state and just go, basically gallivanting all around the world in the ethers. And during this time frame, he was seeing a wolf, which of course was his protector, but he was frightened of the wolf because he didn't know it was a protector. He didn't understand what was happening. Now, to put this into perspective, the next morning I spoke to my son and I said, mate, as you do when you're Australian, hey, mate, just wondering, you know how you're having nightmares? Yes. Are you seeing a wolf? Yes. Okay, well, you might not be aware, but apparently that's your protector. So I've been told to tell you not to be frightened of it. Next time you see it, have a look. It's wearing a collar, right? It's there to keep you safe, okay? And that was the end of that story, which I'll be repeating when I do the amethyst one. But anyway, moving on. What are the emotional and mental benefits of hematite? Well, apparently it helps to concentrate and focus, so it's really good for study and learning. And because you're being grounded and centered and focused in the here and now, it's good for memory retention. It's good to learn technical knowledge that you might employ in your workplace. It helps to feel more connected to the people around you. Obviously, better quality of sleep's up there, and it does actually, as a rule, combat insomnia and gives people the strength to rise above the barriers and blocks that come in their pathway. This is the willpower aspect, you know. It motivates people to persevere and push on in the face of problems, shall we say. Not only that, it has transformational properties where it can, any of the negative thinking patterns are able to be released and transformed into positive, and this consequently will raise the self-esteem and raise trust in self, the decision making. It's supposed to benefit people that are studying mathematics as well, or in pursuits of excellence. Did I mention memory? Good for memory retention, stimulates and enhances it. It is actually considered, where it's a practical stone, it's also considered to be a stone of the mind. And also, apparently, it cultivates this original thinking and new ideas. So, being a bit innovative as well. So, there's lots and lots of really beneficial properties with hematite. From a chakra perspective, it's supposed to work very well with the brow and the crown. However, from my perspective, this is what other people say. I see it as being more about the base because it's such a grounding crystal, but it does have the attributes of this business of being able to see clearly, hear clearly, all of that kind of stuff. And these benefits or attributes that help with the thinking, the mind expansion, all of that kind of stuff, the learning and study, that's definitely crown related. Either way, it does provide foundations for rational, practical thought and decision making. So, yeah, I would say it is both grounding and also mind expanding. And I think I would add to it that because of this connection to the earth and earth elementals and the nature elements, shall we say, I I would have to say that I actually believe it's associated with the earth star chakra as well. So when it comes to using hematite, obviously that's going to depend on the type of hematite that you've got, whether it's polished, whether it's rough, how big it is. I think it makes beautiful jewelry. I don't like seeing pendants and hematite where it's faceted, where it's got all these, I think it's called a marquee cut. I think that just is really unnecessary and it doesn't do justice to hematite. I think when it comes to, this is just my opinion, when it comes to hematite jewelry, it's better actually just to have the little beads of it, and that tends to look better. But of course, you can have it as the tumbled stones. You can wear it in a pouch, your pocket, pop it in your bra. If you've got a big chunky piece of hematite in the raw, you could use that ornamentally. Like I said, we always had them actually as bookends on bookcases. You could hold the raw or the polished while meditating. And if you're the kind of person that likes to do crystal gridding, you could use it for your grids as well. So, as a messenger or oracle, if I had a client, and this is how I always phrase it when I go into these slides, if I had a client put the hand in my crystal lucky dip and pull out hematite, I would actually be asking this person if they're doing enough grounding, basically, that if they're spending too much time in their head, it could be if they're academics and they're all study and no play and they're not getting outdoors, or if they're doing too much meditation or focusing on higher chakras, too much astral traveling, prime example. Are they doing too much of that? And is it time to put their attention on the here and now, the present, and address their earthly needs? Because obviously if they don't, then things can become out of control. The other option that I might give consideration to, dependent on because it's all contextual, when somebody pulls a crystal out, I might be inclined to turn around and say, are you overthinking? Are you making problems where there are no problems? Because you're just thinking too much about a problem and it's just growing bigger than Ben-Hur in your mind. Try and step back emotionally and look at what is as opposed to what you think is happening, because it might be that if there is a problem, it's going to be easily navigated, and it will be navigated with ease when they can be logical and rational in how they are approaching the problem, other people involved in the situation, and just being very clear about what they're trying to achieve, and that's their communication as well. Anyway, I hope I've been clear in how I've expressed that. So when it comes to caring for hematite, if it's polished, obviously it's going to take a little bit more care, because in my experience, while it's a hardy crystal, it's still able to be scratched by other crystals. And if it's not polished, then it's got the capacity to scratch your other ones. So you want to make sure that it's not rubbing up against any other crystals, otherwise you'll damage them. But when it comes to clearing and cleansing, things like that, you can immerse hematite in water, as long as it's not the peacock ore. I'd be very careful about that. It doesn't fade, in my experience, through exposure to sunlight, but if you know different, let me know. You can also, obviously it's not going to be harmed by incense. From what I'm aware, it's not harmed by exposure to heat. Well, I say exposure to heat, depends on whether or not you're smelting it and melting it, and we would need to have it in a furnace to be able to do that. But I think from an average day of exposure to heat in your back garden, if you were in Australia, that's not going to do it any problems either. But yeah, so all of the methods of cleansing and clearing crystals will work for hematite, as far as I know. Let me know if you've had a different experience. As usual, I enjoy using selenite to cleanse and recharge all of my crystals, and that includes hematite. I would be very careful if I chose to use an amethyst geode, especially if it was hematite in the rough, because that will do damage to the points. You might be able to put a small polished tumble in your amethyst geode, though. Just as usual, be careful. So, my friends, I'm going to say thank you very much. I'm going to wind this video up now, so it doesn't get too long. So I hope that you have managed to learn something positive from me today, and I invite you to share your experiences so that I can learn from you, because I love learning as well. Never stops. In the meantime, going to love you, leave you. Have a wonderful day, wonderful week. Take care. Catch you on the next one. Bye-bye for now.